part 2, week 8, R622. There's been some weeks in which I've done a lecture after our guest or before our guest, but not every week of the semester. I've picked my slots and my places for, I think it's most appropriate. And so I think this week is a time in which to present my second of 3 model, or actually third. I did Education 2020. I did the Tech Variety model, and now we'll do this talk on the R2D2 model, read, reflect, display, and do. When we get to smart environments or smart learning, smart technologies, I'll have something to say about that too, but I do not have my own framework. I have my own questions about that. And we have 2 guests that night, hopefully coming in. Michael Spector is one of the most well-known people in the field of educational technology, coming from North Texas, and my friend Sanjay Mishra from the Commonwealth of Learning in Vancouver, who just published my new free book, which I posted to Facebook. If anyone saw that, I posted it yesterday. It's a new book on motivation and supporting online learners. And I think I sent it to all of you one week anyways. It came out rather a couple of weeks ago. The R2D2 model was not my model, was not a model, but it was something that I was using for the first half of my career. And in 2003/4, I gave a talk to Texas Tech students. Dr. Ka Jong at Texas Tech was a new assistant professor there. She got her degree at Penn State. And she said, would you like to talk on your R2D2 model? And I said, I don't have an R2D2 model. She says, yes, you do have an R2D2 model, because every one of your syllabi say read, reflect, display, and do. Here's what percent is for reading, reflection, displaying, and doing. So she was right. My P640 course on thinking in a social context, thinking and learning in a social context, that 4 assignments, 1 for reading, reflecting, displaying, and doing. And she said, that spells R2D2. I said, you're right. She said, why don't you talk to my class through video conference? When we got done with the video conference, she says, Dr. Bonk, Curt, we should write an article about this model. How would you like to write an article about that model with me? I said, okay. And then within, 15 minutes later, that time elapsed, she comes back, no, we should write a book on that. I said, okay, silly me. and while we were writing the book, she ended up quitting her job at Texas Tech and took a new job at Wayne State University, where she still is today. She actually interviewed at IU once and came close to getting a job. I wish we would have hired her. She would have been able to address all environments, K-12, higher ed, corporate training, and beyond. She's quite good. So we did a book. It came out in 2008 with Josie Bass, which is owned by John Wiley. And so it's not a free. So my other book, the Tech Variety book, is free. So the one with Josie Bass is not. I didn't bring it up here into this room, but you might have seen it, or I can show it next time. So that's one framework I've been using for a lot of workshops for teachers, a lot of professional development, to teach people about teaching in online environments. I had the Tech Variety model and the R2D2 model, and often I'll present both. What I did in this class, I divided them up into 2 distinct weeks so that we could just reflect on one at a time. And Christian had R546 with me. And then that class in the fall, I presented on that. I think Sunmei, were you my TA last fall in that class, right? A year ago. I think you were
I think it was Merveille, wasn't it?
Oh, Merveille, right.
Merveille, yeah.
Merveille was,
yeah.
Okay. So were you in that class, Sunmei, as a student? Last fall? On my Saturday class? Both you and Christian were in there.
Yeah.
And Christian was like having 2 extra instructors with me. So let me call up my slides if I can find them. And I'm gonna have to hit all slides. There we go. And you can see that, right, Christian? Yep. So title is, this is a master class. So this is very popular. So in Australia, they started calling, when I go there, call it a master class. Oh, that's kind of nice. So I just use the title anyways, master class. And actually I went back, so I've updated it constantly this time, but I went back in time to an older version so I could call up some of the theory behind this. So addressing diversity. So this is also appropriate for the diversity, equity, and inclusion era or time period in which we find ourselves. Deep concern about addressing student diversity and being equitable and so forth, and being inclusive in our environments. And one of the ways we can be inclusive in teaching online or face-to-face or blended is to start compartmentalizing our instruction into different aspects of what we're attempting to do. And as Ben pointed out, it's not necessarily necessary that all components exist or they'll go in a logical order, but we have to list them somehow so we can interpret them and understand them. So it's listed in a problem-solving wheel. Reading first, then reflection. Reading can include listening, by the way. So the first segment is, or phase as we call it, is words, text. The second phase is the reflection on those words or text or those visuals. The third is the development and sharing of our intellectual understanding in the form of figures and graphs to try and display what we're learning. And then actually the hands-on trying the new ideas, competencies, and skills out is a doing phase, the fourth phase. Now, you do not have to have all four phases in play for any activity to work. You do not have to go in this particular order of reading, reflecting, displaying, doing. You can start with doing first, then displaying, then reflecting, then actually reading about it. You can try operationalizing things on the fly as you go, right? And so this is one way to divide up the internet into things that we can make sense of. So this is a way to make sense of all the lush opportunities that exist out there in online learning in collaborative environments. And you see in the inside quadrants, in terms of problem orientation and acquiring knowledge, that's the first phase. And you get into the second phase of clarifying the problems that exist in the learning environment and actually constructing new knowledge and sharing it, like what goes on in Canvas, or might go in a concept map for Christian, or what might go in a timeline and so forth. And then looking for solutions and representing those solutions in some way, shape, or form. And then transferring your knowledge and evaluating that knowledge, transferring into another knowledge domain, perhaps. There are different ways to think about the units or skills of knowledge that we're gaining in any learning environment. This is one way to think about teaching in an effective, powerful, meaningful manner, if you will. And so we're addressing diverse learners out there and on this planet, not on other planets so far. And one of the ways to think about this model was from the standpoint of people's learning styles. So if you took my fall class, I didn't have these slides. These are new slides from last fall, Christian and Soon May. I'm going back to actually my old slides. I'm an educational psychologist by training. Educational psychologists are told not to believe in learning styles. Okay, so while you will go through this R2D2 model and look and say it's a learning style model, the professors who designed it, Dr. Bonk and Dr. John, don't look at it as a learning style model. However, that's in terms of analyzing student learning. As if you want to think about teachers, instructors, reflecting on their teaching, then by all means, you want to talk about, style or whatever you want. If it improves your teaching, you can think about, whatever we want to frame it, that if it helps you, by all means do that. So from a psychological standpoint, from a validity and reliability standpoint, learning styles don't hold any water. It's like Christian loves the Myers-Briggs inventory. He says, I'm an introvert or extrovert, I'm this and that. Yeah, that Myers-Briggs has served millions of people well. But psychologists, point out in many articles that you can read on the Myers-Briggs that it's got huge reliability issues and retest reliabilities and also in validity of what it's really measuring. And the same is true here. So you can have faulty instruments, faulty understandings, faulty definitions, and they still could be valuable. It still could have an impact. Okay. So what we want to do is promote reflection on one's teaching, but not just reflection, then action on that teaching, doing something with their models or frameworks or some schemes. And then, this model, this R2D2 model, is a way to think about teaching and learning from diverse student point of view, and a way for students to think about their own understanding from alternative points of view. This model is a way for you to embed variety in your classroom, just like my tech variety model was intended to do as well, so that we're not just always lecturing and discussing and so forth. We might have visualization activities. We might have some kind of meta reflection activities. We might have some kind of overarching historical visualization of the class, whatever it is. It breaks us out of our lockstep approaches to teaching and instruction, and enables us to incorporate changes that occur around us in our environments, be they technological, pedagogical, psychosocial, emotional changes that wrap around us. The antennas can kind of go up a little bit, because we have this model to rely upon, at least, to have us feel comfortable as instructors and know that we're hopefully addressing different learner points of view and backgrounds and experiences and expectations. It could lower dropout rates, because more people will feel connected to the classroom. And the R2D2 model definitely fosters experimentation, because some people will experiment with the high risk and high time ideas, and others with the low risk, low cost, low time. So the guy, no, not that guy. So the guy you see standing on a desk jumping off that is me. Actually, I have a lightsaber. I have multiple ones. We used to have lightsaber battles in my classroom. I no longer do that, as I've gotten maybe a little bit older and wiser, and I don't want to get hurt. But I'm curious, if in the chat, if you put down, are you more of a audio learner, a verbal learner? For A, put read. If you're more reflective, write reflect, or put a B. If you're a more visual person and like displaying your learning, put a C. And if you like the hands-on and tactical kinds of things in exploration, put D or do. You either write the word or you put that in there. So there are different models. And actually, I read an article from the military when I was an Army Research Institute fellow and a Department of Defense fellow after that, back in 1999 and 2005. And they did a big paper comparing all the learning style models, and they also found the flaws out there in most of them. One of the most accepted models was the VARC model by Fleming and Mills. It discussed 4 types of learning and learning styles: visual, auditory, reading, and kinesthetic or tactile. Notice how similar it is with the R2D2 model. It's almost a one-to-one match, which my friend Kajong, who wrote the book with me, pointed out to me, and we wrote an article that was published on this. We wrote several articles. And by the way, the R2D2 book, like most of my books, the author had, the editor cut 4 or 5 chapters of the book out, just deleted them. So we decided to publish them elsewhere, and including the one about learning styles and so forth. So according to Fleming and Mills, with these 4 learners and learning styles, visual learners, maybe like Christian, prefer diagrams, flowcharts, graphics, which today we also can look at podcasts and webcasts and PowerPoints like this one, and video and filmographies and documentaries and so forth. Audio learners, like myself, listening in my car, listen to lectures, listen to verbal information, and process a lot of things that way. I'm actually more of a visual than I am an audio learner, to be honest. And reading and writing learners prefer text, passages, words, and written explanations. And finally, tactile learners, kinesthetic learners, learn best by connecting through trying it out, through seeing a model simulate it, or having an animation and then trying it out, and being in the real world, like the Youth Participatory Action Research program we saw. Well, one of the people I read in grad school who's very popular is a guy named David Cope. And I think Cope passed away. Soon May, you could look this up and look up David Cope and see when David Cope, the famous guy for his book, type in experiential learning. It's a very famous book. And if you're watching this episode and you haven't bought David Cope's experiential learning and you go to Amazon and you see it there for $1 or $2, you'd be really remiss not to pick it up for $1 or $2. It's a classic. He wrote 1 to 3 sentences a day over 3 years to create that book. He synthesized a number of fields of psychology and education together in coming up in writing his book, Experiential Learning, or so I am told. I've never met the man. And he might have been a business professor, actually. So Coe talked about these 4 phases or 4 aspects of effective learning: having concrete experiences, having reflective experiences, abstract or active ones, getting involved in a concrete experience, listening, observing, creating an idea, abstract conceptualization, and making decisions. Again, very similar to the R2D2 model, although not exactly, but it's one derivative of it, maybe, or we became a derivative of his model. So he says, if one person may be better at some aspects of learning than other aspects, and as a result, different styles develop. That's David Cope there, if you want to see a picture of him. And so he had, or someone developed a set of questions that would help you understand whether you're active experimentation or reflective observation kind of person. And so I often produce off-the-cuff ideas. You're AE, or I'm more of a thorough methodological person, more brute force and painstakingly slow about it. Are you more spontaneous or more thorough? Are you more flexible-minded or more careful and cautious? Are you more loud and outgoing, or are you more quiet and shy, like Sume and Christian and Megan, everybody here tonight? I don't know if Raj came back or not. Bo, glad you popped back in, bro. So that's one axis. The other axis is abstract conceptualization versus concrete experiences. Are you like Spock in Star Trek, very logical and structured and rational? Or are you practical and down to earth like Bones, the medical doctor? Do you like to plan events to every last detail and have everything laid out like my daughter does? Or you're more like my son, more flexible in your plans and more realistic? Are you difficult to get to know, or are you rather easy to get to know? Difficult, like some people say you go to Finland, they're very shy and reserved, but once you get to know them, you're friends for life, So they're kind of both in some ways. So you have these axes. Active experimentation is doing, reflective observation is watching on one axis, on the horizontal. On the vertical, concrete experiential feeling versus abstract conceptualization thinking. And again, graduate school is more like the bottom, right? And more like the right-hand side. The real world out there making mobile apps with Sunmei might be more like the upper left or bottom right, more of a pragmatist or active. And those people who might be writing poetry might be in the upper right, maybe perhaps reflective diverger, writing songs and poetry and all that. So that's one way to think about employing Cope's learning styles out there and reflecting on, how you process information. These are all continuum. You're not going to be on the far right or far left or the top or the bottom. You end up taking this questionnaire and they give you scores. And so you might be number 3 towards active concrete experience, and that's on a scale of 1 to 10. So you draw one line up from the middle to a 3. They can put numbers here 1 to 10, and you draw another line for the active conceptualization or reflective, and and then you put it on the line. You might be a 2 for reflection, more reflective than active. So you might be 2 towards reflection, might be 3, 4, or 5 towards concrete experience. And then you draw a line between the two and you shade it in, and you can see what quadrant you're shading in effect. I don't know if I'm explaining that properly, but you draw both you put a dot on the end of both continuum, and you see where the 2 lines then intersect. And that's where you are. And that's how you start interpreting your skills and talents and your interests and preferences. Now, I prefer the word preferences over styles, because those preferences might change. They're not locked in. Once we start talking styles, then people start giving up something. They start saying, I'm not good at, as opposed to I can do. So the real troublesome area of styles is this nebulous thing that I have no sense of control over. It's somebody, my brain is styled this way to appreciate, words and not, not images, for instance. Well, that's probably not true. You just have more experiences, maybe. You have preferences based on your upbringing, maybe. Your Christian's parents took him to a lot of documentary movies when he grew up. He likes filmography and all these visuals and so forth. He went to art museums with his father and so forth. And, that's the way he was raised. And that's why, he has these preferences, not styles. Is that right, Christian?
I literally cried when I watched the documentary about the Sphinx eroding, because I said, Mom, I'm never going to get to see the Sphinx.
And did you go? Have you gone yet?
I haven't gone yet, but I realized that my logic in the timeline was a little off.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. That's true. It's been eroding for thousands of years, literally, right? And it's, and now they have scientists that can actually, create barricades around it or something to inhibit it or slow down such erosion. Although you saw the Easter Island heads, a number of them got burned by the gigantic fires that they had on Easter Island recently. That's really, really sad. But some were saved. But still, the fact that I don't know how many, but it said a good number of them. Did you find out, Christian, how many of those were burned down?
I didn't read the article, but I saw that.
Yeah. So some people started creating these questionnaires, like Barbara Solomon at North Carolina State. If you are a teacher and teaching a course, you don't want to teach a course with facts in real life or one with theories and ideas. Do you prefer to get new information in pictures and diagrams, maps, or in written directions, right? So these are the ways to operationalize Kolb's learning style ideas and theories to the classroom practices. And the R2D2 book is another way in which you might do that. And so that's the picture of the cover of the book. We got mad at the publisher because they wanted to change my title from R2D2 to The Verve. And because they thought George Lucas would sue us, and therefore we couldn't use R2D2 in the book. And we found out from the attorney at Wiley that we couldn't use it on the book cover, but it could be anywhere else in the book. So it's just the book cover that they were concerned about. And after changing the whole manuscript, after changing everything in the whole, and we had to go and change it back. Such a ridiculous thing. Dealing with editors of books is such a pain. And this is being recording, and I don't mind saying that. But my current editor is a great guy, Dan Schwartz at Rutledge. So he can watch this. He is a great human being. And he can buy me dinner in Las Vegas in 2 weeks if he shows up. So this is a former dean of the School of Ed endorsing the R2D2 model. Just, this Gerardo Gonzalez saying, he put this in a slide of his somewhere. It's a great guy. Just retired to St. Augustine, Florida. I will visit him in the spring, I think. So read, reflect, display, and do, R2D2. And actually, as I said, we do have battles in class and fights and so forth. The guy in the red there on the right-hand side is Chris Essex. He is my former podcast partner from 15 years ago, and he passed away in his sleep about 15 years ago. And I didn't do any podcasts until our Silver Lining show started 2.5 years ago. I felt the guy on the left in the dark hair is Jingli Cheng, who brought me to Hong Kong about 7 years ago. He was working at the University of Hong Kong. He also worked at Stanford, Sunmei, in the business school where you are. And he worked for a number of different, he worked for Adobe, and then he went to work for MasterCard in New York, where his wife was working in New York, and now he's working for a law firm. So doing instructional design in New York City, and was my guest last semester in R511. So you might have heard from Detz Jingli there. I was chopping his head off. So yeah, my younger days anyhow. I was challenging people to battle. So there's Ka doing the R2D2 in room 2275 of the School of Education in the ISD classroom when she interviewed for a job here. And so we should go on. So auditory learners, verbal learning, auditory, verbal words spoken or written explanations. Before I get into this part, does anyone have a question? Let me stop the recording just for a second so you can see what people have written down. D's, a lot of D's, okay, D's and H, everything. Okay, you cheating and you, okay, everything. Does anyone have a question so far for me? Yeah, Christian.
So I guess if you have read my midterm paper, then this question might be leading. If not, then maybe you'll have some insight on my midterm paper. But how do you see yoga, the mind and body exercise, as fitting into Kolb's model of learning preferences? Can it foster all of the aspects depending on the learner's goal?
Yeah, I thought you were going to ask me about Yoda, not yoga.
Yoda might do
yoga. Okay, yeah, he's very mindful, which is the topic of next week is mindfulness and belonging. Well, topic in 2 weeks is mindfulness, and next week is belongingness. Is that right? Yeah, and well-being, and then the week after is mindfulness, open thinking, and radical creativity. So 2 good weeks, I think, a little bit different than what you'll get in any other ISD class. So take Bonk's class. It's the only class you get mindfulness, radical creativity, well-being, open thinking, and belongingness. Now you might get some of that in other classes, but I'll state those parts out so the others can't grab them. So they're mine now. And I'll add yoga in as a result. Next time I teach this course, I'll be looking up how yoga can fit into the design of learning environments and getting people in fitness kinds of activities, right? Which I'm all about as well. I would think that yoga helps us understand ourselves as a human being, as a learner in particular, and the limitations and how to stretch our limitations and be more flexible, both in our physical bodies, but as well as our mental approaches. And I think any framework that does any good in education today has to deal with this flexible notion of learning. If you're not flexible, if you're constraining, it's people are going to say you're taking us back to the old way, to education 1.0, which was very top down, very authoritarian in nature, and didn't allow for openness to new ideas oftentimes because people were trying to cover the constraints of the curriculum based on the tests that they had. And so having openness and freeing one's mind up to study what they want to study or are interested in, which yoga enables us to do potentially, is antithetical to education 1.0, is embraced by education 3.0. And so I would say that yoga would be a preparatory exercise and a continual exercise throughout an effective and engaging learning environment, because you cannot create sustainable learning environments for the long haul if you're not addressing the well-being of the learners and participants in that instructional setting. I didn't say classroom, in that instructional setting, instructional environment, that learning environment. So if you want to be an architect for effective learning environments, yoga might be part of that, because you're helping people take time out from the stresses of their everyday life and the doing to have a sense of nothingness, as well as metacognitively reflecting on where they're at this point in life, at this point in their journey as a graduate student, or the task that they're currently engaging themselves in. Yoga enables us to pause for a second and to stop our mind from thinking about too many things and helping us focus on one or two things or nothing. And that has to be extremely valuable in this age of knowledge changing every couple of years within a discipline. I mean, totally 100% transformative. And you cannot keep up with all those knowledge changes. So how can you even get a sense of who you are as a learner, who you are as an instructor, if you don't stop for a second and reflect on your progress, your journey, your present sense of where you're at as a learner, what you've accomplished, what you've not, where you're going, your plans. Because if you're constantly reading the next new thing, you're not thinking about yourself in terms of your journey, in terms of your plans, in terms of your outcomes. And you're also not giving your mind a break from all this constant waves of information coming at us. So yoga it might be some other kind of technique. It wouldn't have to be yoga. So I would say it could be, but it would not have to be. It might be Tai Chi or, something else. You want to comment again, Christian?
Yeah, so along with my paper, I also attached a paper, one of the articles that was it hit on exactly what I was looking for and so that's maybe not the best way to find an article, but it's I'm just looking for something to validate my thoughts. It was interesting because it talked about, so yes, I believe it's absolutely all of those things you just said. But one of the things that this paper touched on, which was a thought of mine, and they did it much better justice than I did, but it was this concept of embodied analogy. And so the actual kinesthetic motion in itself helps to scaffold larger concepts and analogies of this particular paper was on management and how to teach people about struggle, whether that's a struggle with a coworker, whether that's a struggle with learning about themselves. Self-mastery is a big thing, but that embodied analogy of that struggle is something that they're able to then learn through. It's a fascinating paper. I'll be very interested to see what your thoughts are, but it brought that kinesthetic aspect of learning into it in a way that I've personally experienced, but didn't necessarily know exactly how to vocalize or verbalize.
Well, see, Sunmei found the book, didn't you, Sunmei? Good for you. Can you buy it for $1 on Amazon used? I don't see it for $1 here. Oh,
it's really expensive, but
yeah,
there are other options.
That's the second edition. Find the first edition. I bet you it might be. Anyhow, going back to Christian's comment, Christian just got an A+. And if anybody didn't turn in their assignments, I haven't downloaded them yet. So you can write an email to Christian and see if you can get your name on the paper with him so you can get an A+ too. So if you're just add a few paragraphs or whatever, and it's all well and good. Just I'll be downloading. I'll do my other class first, 795. So you have some time. Just Christian, what's your email address? Everyone will write to you. No, I'm just kidding. I appreciate the ability to grade something that's a little different than the norm. And so I will look forward to reading that paper. Let's just say I will go back to sharing my screen. We don't want to stay here all night here, but I appreciate the question. And if anyone has a question, please jump in. So auditory learners, spoken words, and so forth. So we're trying to think about, in the book, what are some activities that fit each quadrant? And so Ka and I came up with 25 activities for each quadrant. 25 times 4 is 100. Just like Tech Variety, it was 10 activities for each of the 10 phases, or 10 times 10 is 100. So I was going to do another book that was going to be called Blended Learning Ideas. And I think that was like 15 or 20, letters. And then I was going to, do 5 times 20 or have, 100 blended learning ideas, but I didn't write the third book. So there are 2 books out there anyway. And so this is phase one of the problem solving. You see Jordi LaForge there. He had the Reading Rainbow series on TV for kids. So I put him in with readers. Now, Jordi was standing next to me at a conference in Austin, Texas. It's the big, what do they call it? What's the Austin conference every year, Christian? What is that festival in March or April? They bring Barack Obama down to be the keynote, and Bill Gates was the keynote when I was there. They have the big music festivals goes on in Austin. What's the
Is
music?
it Burning Man?
No. South by Southwest. So they have the South by Southwest.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Burning Man's in Vegas area. So I think.
Okay.
Or in Nevada. In Nevada. So South by Southwest. They've created South by Southwest Education (EDU), and we had a moment where we got the chant with the Secretary of Education, Arnie Duncan. And one of my friends snuck me into it through a back room, and I wasn't even supposed to be there. I didn't have clearance, but he snuck me in, and I got to ask Arnie Duncan a question. And standing next to me was Jordi LaForge. I didn't know who he was because he didn't have his visor on, his glasses from Star Trek. He was also in Roots originally, as a teenager. So he's been around for a long time. He's a good guy. So the words, you might be speaking to your Alexa or Google Home, your intelligent agents out there, your intelligent butlers. This is only going to increase. This phase of learning is going to skyrocket with robotics, with intelligent personal digital assistants and intelligent agents. And so, we listen to podcasts, we listen to Silver Lining for Learning, we listen to NPR, we listen to whatever show it is that interests you. Well, that relates to phase one. And so you can have activities where students are like we do in this class. You can listen or watch Silver Lining. You can watch it in video, or you can listen to it as a podcast, or you can read someone's blog post. So when I spoke to the Forestry Association, Asia Pacific Forestry Association, because it was in Canada, I had all these forestry examples. So there's a few of them here, the forestry blogs and so forth. It's also text to audio. There are some tools which enable you to take a text and have it turn into a British voice or an American voice, a woman or a male voice and whatnot. These will only increase. And one such tool is called Speechify. There are other tools out there. I'm sure Megan and Christian and soon May and Bo have used these. Then you can also use Twitter in your classes and have students reflect on, those Twitter posts, or have them explore based on the Twitter posts, the readings you might post, the articles that you might post, the links to. You might create a Twitter feed for the entire class to get everybody kind of the same resources, the same activities that they might be engaged in during the week. And there's also referenceware, online thesauruses. Now, my favorite is Collins. It's a British one, and I swear by Collins. There's Webster's is out there, and My Dictionary and dictionary.com, and all these, I think the Folklore Dictionary. There's all these dictionaries, but the best resource I found is Collins, because it's a British one, and I learned new words from the British people that they use, and I purposely go to Collins when I rewrite manuscripts, because I can find new words that I hadn't known about before. And I always worry about redundancy, about using the same word twice. And so anyone who's writing their final assignment in here in a few weeks, I would recommend, highly recommend Collins, but there are other ones out there. This is called referenceware. It's called, online dictionaries, thesauruses, spell checks, and all that. And then Oprah Winfrey and others have this tool that they use called the Storyline Online. It's a free literacy platform for kids to listen to stories, and actors might read them out, and kids can listen to them at home before they go to bed at night. Now, assuming these kids are too old to listen to children's stories now, but you probably use something like that. Or the International Children's Digital Library, ICDL, from the University of Maryland, which I had the pleasure of visiting about 12 years ago. I visited Maryland and talked to the director. This is a fascinating project where they've been able to, get a number of books scanned in and created the tools which enable immigrants to, from whatever part of the world they are from Brazil or from Finland or from Morocco or whatever, to be able to access the children's library and get books in English or in their native language. And the foundation aspires to have every culture and language represented so every child can know and appreciate their richness of their own culture from their world community. At the time I visited, they had over 4,000 books in 59 languages, 228 countries. Then there's also grammar checks, which some are reliable and some are not, but they all tend to find things that are problematic for my articles because I have grammars and spelling problems all the time. I would always get, issues, and people, of course, they hated my handwriting. Any place I worked early on before word processors, they would always think I'm the world's worst employee because they couldn't read my handwriting. You will have that problem in reading the midterms feedback that I get. I try and print. It's as best I can do. So, we have grammar checkers out there, and this is all text. So the second phase of the R2D2 model gets at reflection. And here we got the commander in Star Trek Next Generation talking to Q, and Q stands for questions. He would always ask questions, and it was kind of his outside brain. It was his metacognition out there in the ether, right? We really didn't ever know what Q was, other than he was a soapbox actor, actually, at one point in time. I know the guy who played Q, but he got the commander to reflect and to observe things in different ways, to use his judgment and so forth. And so there are some tools online called Big Questions Online, BQO. And you can actually go to this website where they have kids ask or answer questions that are big questions, what if questions, overarching questions, macro level questions. And so you can do this in your own online classes or blended classes and have a student be in charge of the BQO, have the student post the BQO. We are sort of doing some of that in here. You can assume he's having you post questions and you're responding to those respective questions. You can also go to the Jamboard like we're going in here and having students post a KWL. What do you know about the topic? What do you want to know? And what did you learn? This is all reflect on these issues and questions, reflect in the Jamboards. What did you already know about R2D2 before this talk, or the tech variety before that talk? What do you still want to know about? Or do a Venn diagram on the tech variety model, or on the R2D2 model, or on Ben Kirshner's, youth participatory action research, interpretive infographics. This is one from the forestry. This is an infographic there. This is a forestry on, this is an infographic from the global forestry software market in the next couple of years, looking at the growth and so forth. So some faculty today are putting their syllabi out as an infographic. Instead of having it be all text, they just post an infographic of their syllabus. It's a way to encapsulate a lot of information in a small amount of space, right? So we can now start looking at some of these key data points about the growth, about who's building such tools, and the reports about it, and so forth. And so, go the other way. This is another infographic, an article looking at innovation in the world over the next 10 years, or over the next 8 years now. How much money is spent on innovative technology platforms in cloud computing, AI, the internet of things, mobile learning, and digital wallets, and they blow up. The more money being spent on, look at AI is the big one. Cloud computing is the second largest. You go back to 2020, AI might be second. In 2030, it might. So it's a way to see where the growth is happening in robotics, gene editing, and so forth. Infographics. Instead of reading it all, we now have to interpret the animation, the visual, the depiction. Having online role play to have reflective episodes, where people enact different roles like we're doing in Canvas. And Sunmei might assign us to be the devil's advocate, or the organizer, or the planner, or the guide, or the wise person, or the director, or whatever. So I've designed 28 roles for online environments. Sunmei's been using 4 good roles, and that's probably more than all that we need. 4 is good. So just to get it to reflect, again, reflect. Watch a video and reflect on it and post comments, post questions. That's Vialogs, which enable us to do that. Vialogs is a tool developed, I think, at Teachers College Columbia, which got people to then reflect on YouTube videos. So yeah, that's that one. So before I go to number 3, I'm going to stop again. So I did first two phases. I got 2 more. It won't take me more than 5 minutes to go through the last 2 phases. Does anyone have a question on the read or reflect aspect or display or do of R2D2? Any comments?
I have a question.
Yep.
So is one of the phases more efficient than the others? So for example, when I was taking the speed reading course, one of the reasons that they talked about people reading slower is because they're mentally speaking the words as they're reading them. And so the technique that they were teaching in the speed reading course was to visually chunk, and meaning making was through that whole chunk. And so it seems to me like potentially visual input might be better than auditory input when it comes to the potential efficiency. Maybe not specific for a learner, but the potential.
So there's a lot of research on reading comprehension, of course, being ground up or top down, or what tactics you can use when you read. And one of the things that does work is looking ahead at for an undergraduate or high school student will be looking ahead to the end of the chapter for the questions on that chapter before you approach it, or look at the questions at the beginning, or to look at the text signals embedded in the text, which would be highlighting, bolding, underlined words, italicized. And also in my old advice, used to put comments like the summaries of that paragraph, and that's a text signal, the sections of the book. And that doesn't even engage us into the reading aspect. That's just the overview aspects of the book. That helps for meta level processing of that chapter or that prose, right? So for me, it was always getting the book at the bookstore that was highlighted by someone else previously, so I could pay attention to what the other students have highlighted, and then I bought 4 colors highlighters, and I'd read every chapter 4 times before I took a test, probably 5 times, and I highlight in different colors every time through of the stuff I didn't know. And so the first time in yellow, the next time in pink, the next time in whatever, the stuff and it increasingly got less and less that I didn't know. So every pass through, I was continuing to learn. That was a really inefficient method in retrospect. It was Bonk's inefficient method of reading processing. Don't do that. You will not have fun on the weekends. You won't go having beers with your friends because you're constantly highlighting chapters of the book. So my friends would all go out. My brother, who came to the University of Wisconsin at Whitewater, he would party every day and every night, and I'd be out highlighting every chapter of every book 4 times over. So my brother wouldn't read anything, and he'd basically have me do his homework for him since third grade. And but I go on, but I digress.
You're still keeping his books too, right?
He just retired to Fort Myers before the hurricane hit. So
yeah.
But his house is safe, apparently. It was 5 miles inland. So yeah, I would wake up at 11 o'clock on every night in Catholic school and did his homework so he wasn't shot down to the he wasn't retained in the lower. He would push him up to the next level. And of course, he made more money as soon as he graduated from college than I did or anyone else. So, so he had the efficient way. So in terms of efficient, you have to define what efficient means. Efficient in terms of you as a learner or as a short-term learner for that exam, or efficient in terms of you as a long-term learner looking at a career. Because if you use mnemonics to understand something, you can do bang up job on the exam, but you won't remember much of it 10 days later or 2 days later. But if you read for comprehension and use you can go ground up from the basic words and try and understand at the word level, or you can go from the gist and understand the macro context, like through a concept map or a mind map, or study notes in a visual format, or comparison and contrast kinds of things. If you go top down and gist, you're gonna remember more of the things. And if you remember the middlemost ideas, not the least, not the details, and not the big idea, but some stuff in the middle, you can recall better the upper level and the lower level. The research out there shows. So you have to have a good metacognitive monitor to understand what are the kind of not the always the highest level points, but the second tier and third tier points, not down to the detail level. If you remember the middle stuff, you'll have better memory for things over time. And if you do pay attention to this, what's called the cognitive cues out there, and looking at, the questions that are asked at the end, and looking at the summaries, reading the abstracts, all those things. If you read the abstracts before, there are mostly good things for reading the abstract before reading the questions before. That the negatives in it, it interferes with creative processing in the spontaneity of the reading. So it's something called mathemagetic behaviors. Mathemagetic, that's a term some reading psychologists came up with to kind of like to focus you in your reading, to look at those pre-questions and text signals and study aids and all that. But there's research that shows that if you only do that, you limit the learner to those aspects and focusing on those aspects, and you're not paying attention to some of the other that could be critical later on. So efficient for an exam, yes, but it might not be efficient for you being a creative human being on the long haul. You might know a lot of stuff, but you might not be able to adapt that to anything but the exam-based learning, and not in terms of life-based learning. So, that's
why your whole model is so important, right? That's why R2D2 is all a unified model. Unified.
It is. Yeah, it is a way to think about that. And also so I go back here, it reduces stress for teachers, because, we're overwhelmed. And when there's all these things going on the web all the time, there's a new tool being, Sunde's creating new products for our company. We want to know all these, but you can't. But you can know this model and know where it fits in terms of student learning. So we have diagrams and figures and flow charts and all that, like BBC posts these video documentaries, like CNN, like the New York Times. These are free videos for the world to use in instruction. And my research, and many people's research, shows that if you show a short video anchor of 1 minute or 2 minutes long, you can go back and reutilize that short video in your later instruction, and students can reflect on it and have it be a macro context, a shared understanding of what it is that you're trying to point out in a TED talk, right? In a TED Ed now, they can take TED and making educational videos out of TED Talks. But there's all these others like the BBC and CNN, all these news clippings and so forth. This is a way to engage and prime now. So you want to prime nodes so that when you deliver content, you have those nodes already firing, and the new content can be subsumed underneath it in an effective and efficient manner. But through video, you have an imaginal memory to go along with the verbal that you're getting from the video. So it's stored, each of these videos is stored in two ways. It's stored in terms of verbal processing and imaginal processing, right? According to Richard Mayer's research and others, which you read about in R511 and maybe in R711 and so forth. So you have to anchor things and maybe create a macro context for all the learning. It might be, Putin's bombing Ukraine, but my course might be railroad systems in transportation systems in Europe and or in European history. Well, this short video of Putin blowing up a train station might form a frame for discussion about where the train hub was heading to, or the conveyance of goods and capital across the European network, right? And these short videos might have great explanatory value and pique interest at the same time. It motivates students because we have some current knowledge. It's not just reading the textbook about railroads of the or 1880s in London and in Paris, it's still relevant, very relevant today when you see it in the news, right? In the New York Times, talking about COVID, we're talking about psychosocial emotional assistance that's needed and suicide prevention and all this stuff during, this tremendous public health dilemma called COVID. And then if these videos are too long, there are tools out there that chop them up, like TubeChop can chop up YouTube videos, and you can have a short segment to show to your class instead of a half-hour long that you got to find your piece. And then not only videos, you can have animations that show COVID crisis and how to deal with it and what are safe healthcare, sanitary healthcare and so forth that can save lives. A short animation video can save thousands of lives, right? And they're very powerful in terms of courses in anatomy or in public health or in other areas. In the World Mapper tool, you can put all data instead of a graphic organizer. You can put things on a map. So I can see COVID deaths at the beginning of the pandemic were primarily in China, and to some degree, in Singapore and other places. You can see it blown up on the map. That's on the left-hand side. After about 6 months of COVID, they are now happening in the US and Europe. You can see the maps. I now can process that in a new way, right? And we can also have a timeline. As we move across this timeline, you can show concentrations of COVID in different colors, potentially, not in terms of thickness or the fatness of the map. You can use colors, and red might be real intense areas, and China might be locked down. So there's nobody getting COVID in China that they're reporting anyhow. This might be happening. So again, different visualizations can help us in terms of teaching our content areas. When we give a talk, like the fourth or fifth guest of Silver Lining was my friend Paul Kim at Stanford, where Sunmi had created the questions in his tool called Smile. Well, this woman on the left here, she drew a picture of his guest appearance in Silver Lining. So now we have her visual representation of his entire podcast. So it's a way, not only visual, but there's text with it. So it's a way of understanding that entire thing. And you can see I'm in there too somewhere. You can see if I don't know if down there. So she drew all of us, kind of fun. And she came a couple of weeks, and that I thought she was going to come every week for a while for free. She designed graphically. And then there's a tool called Lucid for Education out of Utah. And I've had a guest, I guess she showed up for our class. Her name is Elizabeth Bealey. She's very young, but very interested in educational technology, and the impact thereof. So she's interviewed me several times and come to my classes. She works for Lucid for Education. It has Venn diagrams, it has concept maps, it has timelines, it has comparison and contrast, all these things. Then we can do a PMI, plus minus an interest in a Jamboard, and visualize what are the pluses, what are the minuses, what are the interesting on the use of video for an instructional tool. We can use Miro. If you're late at night, like I am, watching a little bit of television, there's new commercials from Miro that are pretty funny, involving monsters killing. I don't know what they're actually doing, but anyways, they're spending a lot of money on commercials at night, pointing out why Miro is important in our lives. Because you can do many kinds of instructional activities. Instructional design activities are very engaging, as pointed out here, like digital storytelling and improvisation and making analogies and so forth. Then there's video annotation tools like Video Ant out of the University of Minnesota. This lets us make comments on the video or embed these comments. Like on the left there, you can see students have watched the video, and as different parts of the video come up and different comments from the students appear. So we had a student, Professor Bowling had a student named Craig Howard, who did a dissertation on annotating teacher videos, pre-service teacher videos, making comments on them. It's very popular, not just watch the video, but to get text on the video, like the tool from Teachers College Columbia that I had up here earlier. I forgot the name of it now. So there's, Video Ant is a free tool. There's some called Ed Puzzle. I'm not sure how that works, but there's another tool called Hypothesis that IU supports. And in a couple of weeks or a couple of months, my committee is going to offer a free webinar on Hypothesis and how to use it in your classrooms, embed annotations on articles in effect. There's another tool called Perusal, which Dr. Hickey uses. If you have Dr. Hickey's class, he uses Perusal for annotations as well. There's little sticky notes on what you're reading. Then there are word clouds and other things, so you can see visualizing words in different ways, like WordSift and Word It Out. There was a tool called Wordle, which no longer exists. It's the most popular tool. Then finally, number 4 is tactile, hands-on games and simulations, acting out and doing something, whether it's coding and designing and making, like Will and Sharon and one other student in here came in and talked about the makerspace kinds of things to get students involved in problem solving and design and critical thinking and so forth. Or students, as Ben pointed out, putting a gallery of students' work is extremely important. So students can see what others have done. They can feel pride in sharing their product with an audience beyond the instructor. So having an online archive or gallery of best student work. There's Tina, she was the other one who came in to talk about maker spaces, and she has a maker space in Greene County for STEM education and kids. You can have students design websites, design podcasts, have podcast shows, have books, design open textbooks and other kinds of things. You can have students create explanatory videos like for my Tech Variety book and so forth. And you can have students write books like my new book. So, hopefully you got some ideas from this. And remember, I cannot do this alone. And so I will stop and end there. So it is 9:25. It's a little longer than I hoped to be. Does anyone have a comment or a remark before we close for this evening?
Sumay, do you have anything?
Anyone have anything in the chat that they want to mention?
Go ahead, Sumay, if you have something to say.
No, I thought about the efficiency of learning. That's because that was really important, but it's really hard to define what efficiency is. So for example, we quickly that reading really fast to the books, we think that, oh, it's really efficient. But I think about actually what is the purpose of learning. So actually, I think that it's a kind of knowledge transfer, right? So just retention, how to save that knowledge in my long-term memory, right? So that is more important. So maybe efficient, maybe different, according to the condition, something. So actually, I'm very slow learner. So I spend more time to read books, right? That's because I need more time to understand what it means every time. So actually, before starting this field, I think that I'm not efficient person. But after that, actually compared to other people, I can keep more, I realize that. So maybe I'm slow, but I'm better in efficient, something like that. So yeah, that's a really great point, I think. So nowadays, actually, I talk to my children, okay, just you need more time to understand, right? So you don't understand that way? No, just you need more time. So everyone has different, skill and different learning style, something like that. So that's really great, I think. So as a mom, so actually, I'm really happy to learn this skill. Thank you.
Thank you for offering compliments as well as ideas. And I agree with what you had to say. Thank you very much. I'll give Megan the last comment, or Bo.
I was just gonna say I'm an alarmingly slow reader. So and I did like a reading test one time and I was like, oh.
Multiple times I need.
Yeah. So I think I need Christians, I need to take that course on speed reading, I think.
It was on Udemy.
And
It was $10 on sale for $10.
Oh,
there you go. Oh, I can do that. I can handle
yeah,
that.
maybe we will try.
Right.
It works, but I'm not sure.
Well, you can take it and then you can create the new version for $11 or maybe for $9 and get everyone to take your class. I don't know. Christian, you're going to say?
I think it's really interesting because the R2D2 model actually, I think, can address what we discussed earlier with the students involved in the board meeting at their school, because regardless of their incoming knowledge about that, they have something that they can bring to the table, certainly. And this could be, how you talked about the R2D2 model being different orders. It doesn't have to follow the order that's displayed here. It can come first in doing. I mean, doing would be actually being at the board meeting, kind of not being that expert, maybe not having a clue what's going on fully, but having that opinion. And then you can go back in class, in government class or history class, and talk about, or civics class, and talk about the readings for that week, which happen to talk about taking leadership in these types of roles. And then the students can reflect on that, and then they can create a new presentation for the next board meeting.
You're operationalizing the item, and that's what needs to be done, is integrating and operationalizing, not just one-off activities, right? And that's what you're thinking about. Bo, you have a final comment for us? I think he might be putting his kids to bed. So
Get a work cog.
Right. So, okay, that's a work cog. So I want to thank everyone for coming in tonight. The guest for next week, Hee-Jung Ahn, has been texting me saying she wants to watch the video from tonight on R2D2 before she comes in. So I will make sure these are downloaded tonight, and we make YouTube videos out of these and for this class, and we'll bring her in at 8 o'clock. She's in. And so maybe from 7 to 8 next time, we can just do maybe a Q&A as opposed to presentations, maybe having discussions. Maybe I should have everyone that comes bring in their favorite discussion posts and just talk about what people have been discussing in Canvas. If I get the okay from Sunmei to do that, I'll just, we'll just start the hour, and then the second hour will be with Hee-Jung and her articles. We got 3 of our articles assigned in this class, but the one for next week is Factors Affecting Online Learning During COVID-19 Pandemic, Lived Experiences of Parents, Teachers, and Administrators in the U.S. High Needs K-12 Schools. But she has 2 other articles for us to contemplate later in the semester. I'm trying to find which ones those are, but trust me, they're in there. So they're at the top of week 14. Implementing Learning by Design, a synchronous online environment to teach robotics, educational robotics to K-12 or to in-service teachers. And an article called Hands On, Minds On, Hearts On, Social On, the Collaborative Makers Project in Synchronous Environments for Teachers. So 3 interesting articles that she has, and she'll be in at 8 o'clock talking about one more deeply and about the other 2 in a shorter way. So it should be quite good. But I think if we save the first part for questions for me, and for discussion of your Canvas posts, that will make it a lighter kind of thing next week for all of us. I will end the recording there, and I will stop the recording and just say thanks anyone who watched the recording. And now we go.